Hello friends, welcome back to another edition of Austin's American Flyer. Happens to be the 4th of July weekend, and it's kind of nice to have some of my chores done and have a little time to spend in the train room. I'm privileged today to be joined by this and one other engine that happened to be a friend of my dad's. His name is Leroy. And I remember as about a 3-year-old going into the basement of Leroy's house and seeing a train set. And it was American Flyer. Didn't know what it was at that point other than, oh my goodness, it was cool. And I don't remember getting to see anything run. I just saw a plywood tabletop with trains all over it. I remember seeing a Santa Fe war bonnet because I had an HO1 at the time, so I knew what that one was, but beyond that I knew nothing about what I saw. About a year ago, I had the privilege of entertaining Leroy for a short visit here. He came to see the trains, and I just mentioned to him at the time if he had any that needed work, I'd be happy to do that for him. And so he sent me 2 engines to go through. I have no idea if anything's wrong with them or if something's wrong with them or if they just need a lube. And so I wasn't even going to videotape this, to be honest with you, but I thought I should probably find out what it is I'm looking at here. So I opened up Doyle's book and found out that, wow, there's a lot of variations of the Silver Flash Alco engine. Both the A unit has many variants, and then there's a B unit that shows up for a short while too. And that's the primary reason I decided to turn the camera on. I also happen to have come across one of these that is a 781. This is a 477. I'm sorry. I have happened to recently be given a 481 Silver Flash. And according to Doyle's book, that's from 1956. This one happens to be a 477, and this one was part of the AB unit from 53. What's also interesting about this one is even though it's got a lot of playware on it, it's chrome. I believe it's chrome. Unless it was painted over chrome, which I suppose could be. It could be that maybe it was painted over. It's this camera overhead you can see some spots here where there's some wear, and below it, it's definitely chrome. And I noticed here on the roof, I see chrome accents, but it could be that this was a chrome one that they painted silver. Here are a few things that happened with the Alco diesel. First of all, I discovered that the inside of the shell was covered in chrome paint. So that told me that this unit was probably originally painted in 1953, but then was covered over with regular silver and released in 54. There were no date stamps inside the shell, so that is based on the evidence we see of playware rubbing off first the silver and then revealing the chrome beneath it. In terms of the once the motor assembly was out, someone has replaced one of the motors on this engine. It's a completely different motor. The field is blackened metal. The stud on the top of the motor is short, and so there's obviously been a lot done to this engine. And the owner did tell me that his parents got it for him used, and so it's hard to say exactly how much has been done to this, but he did tell me that he had someone work on it at some point in the recent past, and after he picked it up from that person, put it on his layout, it ran for a little bit and then started to smoke. And I kind of think I know what's going on with the smoke piece. I discovered that one of the brush holder springs that the end of the spring was sticking just a little bit further than you'd normally see, and that was arcing off the field. And whenever that would start happening, it would dead short, and then you'd see smoke come off the reverse unit. So I think that's probably what happened. I found the field adjustment straps on one of the engines completely out of whack. So first I noticed one screw was completely loose, but later on I went back and did some more adjustments. The engine that was added had two pickup traction tires on it, which, while that's great, they were on opposite sides, and so the one engine just had a terrible time getting decent pickup on my layout, and so I ended up pulling off the second traction tire and putting a regular wheel on there, and then the pickup was greatly improved. The last and most puzzling thing was on the bench. This engine would run very nicely, and I'd put everything back together, take it over to the layout, and it would start to run on my track, and I could get it to run really slowly and smoothly. And all of a sudden, on my wide radius curves, it would just stop, and the short light would kick on the transformer, and I'd shut it off, and I'd move it back and forth and kind of mess with it, and then sooner or later it would start to run again, and then I'd run it around the curve again, and kind of at the same spot every time it would go to a dead short. And that just kept puzzling me. I'd take it back over to the workbench, take the shell off, investigate, not be able to figure out where the short was coming from. Did all kinds of matters of tests. This cycle repeated, I think, 4 times at this point. I removed the shell a total of 6 times, but in the course of that, I did a little repair to these screw slots in the shell so that those weren't stripped out anymore. Anyhow, I finally had to throw in the white towel. I just could not figure out what was going on. I was able to recreate a short on the bench, and there are tab stops underneath the frame that govern the travel of the motors. So get into a situation, it'll only let the motor turn so far, and it comes up against one of these stops. I took both motors completely apart, investigated the insulators that go between the motors and the frame. Everything appeared to be good, but I noticed after I messed with things long enough that those stops, if one of the motors would actually, both motors were on a curve, and they were kind of arcing in, and both of the I guess you'd call them outside tabs were being used, stops, that would cause a major short. So somehow there was power getting up through one of the motor mounts into the stop mechanism at the top, and so when that came into contact with the frame, then there was a dead short because the frame is being used too. So I don't know if there's a problem in one of the fields of the motors. If there is, I couldn't tell. Like, it wasn't getting hot. Amperage wise, the motor wasn't drawing anything abnormally. They both had great speed. They both could run slow. So I didn't see anything obvious that said, hey, we've got a problem in one of the fields. And so I really went through this engine more thoroughly than probably I ever have another engine, trying to figure out where the short was coming. I used my continuity meter. I checked all the wire joints. There was one little spot on a wire that had a little bit of bare metal showing, so I put some electrical sealant on that, but that really wasn't it. And so finally I had to throw in the white towel, like I said, and I put a plastic insulator around one of those stops, so that when those motors arc towards, because of a curve, they won't short out anymore. And now the motor runs perfectly, or the engine runs perfectly, I should say. I ran it through a bunch of tests. I put a heavy load behind it, and it was flawless. So again, I'm scratching my head, and I told the owner kind of what I went through with this beast, And I said, I really want to get this back to factory specs, but I think at the end of the day, there have just been too many hands in this engine, too many things done to it, and at some point along the way, someone did something they probably shouldn't have, and because of that, I'm now doing something that I'd rather not do. Now, the engine's going to run great for many, many, many years, um, but it's disappointing that I couldn't take it back to factory specs for him. But he's getting an engine back, and it'll operate for him. So at the end of the day, I guess really that's what's important. And he said, yeah, that was exactly right. He said, and I quote, "I'm old too, and I have things that don't work the way they're supposed to," which I thought was so funny. All right. That's a little bit of a load right there. You see, you've got 2.5 amps, but again, we've got the double motors. Oh, missing our train here. Let's go ahead and get the rest of that. Yep, that's a load. Got a little bit of spinning, but that's pretty impressive for a load like this. Um, so yeah, this engine's running really well. In forwards and reverse.